This neural network reaches 98% accuracy with minimal computational overhead, I said calmly, correcting the slide that boldly claimed our system was flawless. Colton Reed, my boss and the CEO of Skybridge Analytics, glared at me like I'd just set fire to the boardroom. The chill in his stare could have frozen the skyline outside our Manhattan high-rise. Seated across the sleek glass conference table were 3 potential investors from Apex Horizon Capital. Their expression shifted from passive interest to real engagement as they processed what I'd just said. My name is Dr. Marianne Keller, and I'm 57 years old. I've spent the last 10 years at Skybridge Analytics, most recently as Director of AI Systems Development. Our company specializes in predictive modeling for financial markets, and I had personally spent the last 2 years building the proprietary neural framework now under scrutiny. Watching Colton gloss over my work with buzzwords and bloated claims felt like watching someone read Shakespeare as if it were a cereal box. The system was intricate, adaptive, and required careful explanation, not the flashy catchphrases he was throwing around. What Marianne means, Colton interjected with a tight smile, is that our platform is revolutionary, industry-defining, in fact. He clicked to the next slide, displaying a performance chart I'd never approved. My stomach tightened. The projections were exaggerated wildly, so they suggested performance gains and efficiency metrics we hadn't even begun to validate, and Colton knew it. Dr. Evelyn Monroe, the lead investor, leaned forward slightly. Could you elaborate on the computational overhead? You mentioned Dr. Keller. Our technical auditors will want clarity. Her eyes flicked between the two of us, clearly registering the tension. Colton's jaw twitched. I can take the technicals from here, Evelyn. Marianne is just here to support the data, if necessary. But Dr. Monroe didn't look away from me. I hesitated, only briefly. The system processes approximately 1,000 data points using just under 2 gigabytes of RAM, with an average processing time of 4 milliseconds per query on standard server architecture. Accuracy fluctuates between 96 and 98% depending on data volatility. The 2 other investors, Tom Beck, the financial strategist, and Lena Park, their operations lead, nodded and began scribbling notes. Dr. Monroe raised an eyebrow. That's a much more grounded set of figures than what's on these slides. I caught the vein pulsing in Colton's neck, though his smile didn't fade. Of course. Marianne is extremely detail-oriented, he said, like it was an affliction. As the meeting progressed, more questions came my way, specific ones that Colton couldn't fake his way through. Each time I answered directly, factually, and professionally. Each time I watched the illusion Colton had constructed start to crumble. By the end of the pitch, it was clear the investors had seen through the showmanship. They valued substance over style. And as we stood to shake hands, I knew deep down Colton would punish me for it. But I also knew something he didn't. The tide had just begun to turn. 3 more technical questions came my way, each one initially directed to Colton, and each one quietly deflected to me. And each time, I gave clear, accurate, and data-driven responses that gently but undeniably contradicted the hype-filled oversimplifications in his deck. By the time we stood and exchanged handshakes with the team from Apex Horizon Capital, I could feel the air between Colton and me shift. His expression didn't betray much in front of the investors, but the tightness in his jaw and the stiff way he closed his laptop told me everything I needed to know. I just embarrassed him. And I knew even before I left the conference room that I would pay for it. The next morning arrived with a cold, bitter rain blanketing Midtown Manhattan. A gray December sky loomed above the skyline, and as I stepped into my office on the 32nd floor of Skybridge Analytics, I felt an uneasy stillness that clung to the air like static. I set down my umbrella and coffee, then took my seat in front of the workstation that had been my second home for nearly a decade. I joined Skybridge 10 years earlier after finalizing my divorce and relocating from Chicago. At 47, I was hungry to reinvent myself, not just personally, but professionally. I dove into the company's legacy infrastructure like it was a puzzle waiting to be solved. Within months, I'd streamlined outdated systems, proposed modular improvements, and rewritten large portions of the back-end architecture. Colton had been the COO back then, more grounded, more respectful of technical minds. He'd taken a chance on me when he promoted me to Director of AI Systems Development 3 years into my tenure. Back then, we worked collaboratively. He valued my insights, or so I thought. Over time, however, something shifted. As our machine learning projects began drawing interest from large firms and industry panels, Colton changed. He started showing up to conferences with my slides delivering my data in my voice, but never with my name. Still, I let it go. I believed the results would speak for themselves. Until yesterday. That investor meeting had been building for over 6 months. Apex Horizon Capital was known for funding the kind of deep tech initiatives most firms wouldn't touch, ambitious, unsexy, but transformative. And they weren't naive. They employed their own in-house technical due diligence teams. That's why I had prepared everything so meticulously. My technical brief included real performance metrics, projected milestones, resource burn rates, and scalability limitations. I'd even provided side-by-side comparisons with industry benchmarks. Colton had asked for the documentation the week before the meeting, claiming he wanted to get familiar before presenting. I had no reason not to trust him. Now I understood why he had walked into that room sounding so rehearsed. He'd cherry-picked the parts that sounded impressive and ditched everything else. The inflated charts, the unrealistic launch timeline. He was selling a version of the system that didn't exist and couldn't exist under the constraints we had. If the Apex team hadn't pressed for technical clarity, we could have torched our credibility on the spot. I worried not just about yesterday, but about what would come next. Apex Horizon had a reputation for asking hard questions after the pitch, too. If they circled back to me, if they started probing, Colton's story would unravel quickly. And something told me they would be back. Dr. Evelyn Monroe wasn't the type to be impressed by boardroom buzzwords. With advanced degrees in computational systems and a track record of launching 2 successful AI ventures, she had the kind of technical fluency Colton could only pretend to understand. She'd seen right through him. That fact alone should have reassured me, but instead it made me nervous. My phone buzzed. A text from Claire popped up as if on cue. "Hope your big meeting went well yesterday, Mom. Call us this weekend. The boys want to see the robot lady again." I smiled in spite of myself. Claire always had perfect timing. Her message reminded me that while Colton might control my job title, he didn't define my worth. I had a family who needed my strength. I had something to fight for, something to protect. At exactly 10 Sooners a.m., Colton's assistant appeared at my office door. "He's ready for you now." The walk down the hallway felt shorter than usual, maybe because I already knew what was waiting on the other side. Colton sat behind his massive desk, the New York skyline behind him smudged by gray winter clouds. His office was every bit. The corporate theater, oversized leather chairs, cold marble floors, and walls lined with framed patents he'd had nothing to do with. "Marianne, have a seat," he said smoothly. "We need to talk about your conduct during yesterday's meeting. If you found strength in this story, hit that subscribe button, because what happened next took everything I'd learned and turned it into my greatest move yet." I sat folding my hands calmly in my lap. "I thought the presentation went well," I said. "The investors seemed satisfied with the technical clarity." "That's the problem," Colton replied, voice tightening. "Your clarity made me look uninformed. When I position our system as groundbreaking, I don't need you stepping in with memory benchmarks and statistical ranges." With respect, I said evenly, Dr. Monroe asked for those benchmarks. "That's not undermining, it's transparency." His face darkened. "Dr. Monroe asked me, and I gave you the floor. Instead of supporting my message, you contradicted it and made me look incompetent." He slid a folder across the desk. "Effective immediately, you're being reassigned. You'll report to Thomas Arnett in systems engineering. Salary adjusted, $20,000 less annually." My stomach dropped, but only for a moment. I nodded, slowly, keeping my voice steady. "Understood." Colton sat back clearly pleased with himself. But what he didn't realize? was that the moment he pushed me down, he gave me the perfect angle to rise. The words struck like a slap. After nearly 10 years of building my reputation, mentoring staff, and architecting Skybridge's most advanced systems, I was being demoted, not for failure, but for telling the truth. I stared down at the paperwork where my title had been changed from Director of AI Systems Development to Senior Developer. Just like that, my authority was erased. The signature at the bottom felt like a personal insult carved in ink. "This is punishment for providing accurate technical information," I said quietly, struggling to keep the edge out of my voice. "This is a lesson in understanding your place." Colton replied coldly, not even trying to mask his smugness. "You're a brilliant developer, Marianne, but you clearly don't understand the bigger picture of how a tech firm builds investor confidence." His eyes' narrowed jaw set in condescension. "Maybe this will help you focus on what you're best at: writing code and taking direction." I looked up slowly, meeting his gaze. I forced myself to nod. "You're right, sir. I must have misunderstood my role here." My voice was soft, measured, submissive even, and Colton predictably relaxed. He mistook my composure for surrender. "Good," he said with finality. "Welcome to your new position. Back in my office soon, no longer mine." I closed the door behind me and exhaled. My hands trembled as I set the papers on my desk. The space I had once poured myself into, where I'd written thousands of lines of neural architecture code, now felt alien, temporary. But I wasn't about to disappear. That morning, I backed up everything, every document, every email chain, every Git commit, an architecture map that proved authorship of the technology Colton was now parading around as his own vision. Outwardly, I framed it as prepping for my transfer to a new office. Internally, I was building a fortress. Just before noon, there was a knock. Jennifer Lee, our marketing strategist, peeked in. "Hey, I heard about the reassignment. I'm so sorry, Marianne." I gave a careful smile. "Appreciate it. Just shifting gears, that's all." She stepped in, voice low. "You don't deserve this. Everyone knows that machine learning platform is yours. Half the floor comes to you for answers, not him." I shrugged diplomatically. These things happen. But after she left, I sat in silence, staring at the code scrolling across my monitor. Colton hadn't just removed my title. He had tried to humiliate me in front of an entire team that respected what I'd built. And that was a mistake he was going to regret. The $20,000 salary cut stung. But what hurt far more was the quiet erasure of authority. At 57, I wasn't some fresh hire still proving her value. I'd built this system, I'd mentored the team, and now I was being treated like a junior engineer who spoke out of turn. I sat alone in my office. No longer. My office technically grappling with the humiliation that clung to me like a second skin. At 1:32 p.m., my phone buzzed. The number was unfamiliar. Though the area code 347 suggested it was local, I nearly declined it, assuming it was a spam call. But something made me answer. "Hello, this is Dr. Keller." A pause. Then a smooth, measured voice. "Dr. Keller, this is Dr. Evelyn Monroe from Apex Horizon Capital. We met yesterday during your company's presentation." I straightened in my chair, pulse ticking up. "Of course, Dr. Monroe. Thank you for calling. How can I help?" "I hope you don't mind the direct outreach," she continued. "I pulled your number from your company's public directory. I wanted to follow up on some of the technical insights you shared yesterday. Your responses were both precise and refreshingly honest." "Happy to help," I said, careful to sound calm despite the adrenaline now coursing through me. "There's also something else I'd like to discuss if you're open to a confidential conversation." That word confidential cut straight through the haze of disappointment. "I have time," I replied. Dr. Monroe's tone shifted, slightly more serious now. "To be candid, the discrepancies between the technical depth of your responses and Mr. Reed's presentation raised some internal concerns. Our due diligence process involves identifying key personnel responsible for innovation. I wanted to clarify something directly." I leaned forward. "What would you like to know? Who actually developed the neural architecture? Your firm is pitching Colton's projections, didn't align with your data, and his inability to elaborate was telling. I hesitated, but only for a breath. I did. I designed the entire machine learning framework, the adaptive layers, data optimization, the front-end visualization, every component. That system is mine. That's what we suspected, she said. Our team reviewed patents associated with your name, as well as several academic papers you authored over the past few years. The algorithms match precisely. I swallowed hard. The truth had never felt this dangerous or this powerful. We'd like to speak further, Marianne, preferably somewhere private. I'd like that too, I replied, my voice firming, because whatever Colton Reed had planned, he had no idea the real conversation had just begun. Would you be available to meet with me privately this afternoon? Dr. Evelyn Monroe had asked. We arranged to meet at a quiet cafe tucked along a side street in Soho, far enough from Skybridge Analytics that I wouldn't risk bumping into colleagues. When I arrived, she was already seated in a corner booth, a sleek tablet resting beside her coffee. Her silver hair was elegantly pulled back, her expression calm but focused. Everything about her radiated quiet authority. Marianne, thank you for coming on short notice, she said as I sat down across from her. I thought it best to continue this conversation somewhere off the record. I appreciate your directness, I replied. Though I should let you know, Colton reassigned me this morning. Demotion, new title, smaller office, lighter paycheck. Dr. Monroe raised an eyebrow. He demoted you? For answering technical questions? I nodded, trying not to let the bitterness show. The official line was that I failed to support leadership, that I undermined the presentation. Let me be frank, she said, setting her cup down. Colton did look incompetent, but not because of you. He looked incompetent because he was parroting buzzwords about a system he clearly didn't build. She leaned forward, voice low. We've been looking into this deal for 3 weeks. Your name appears on patents conference proceedings, academic white papers. Colton's nowhere. We know whose brainchild this is. A strange wave of relief washed over me. After months of Colton taking credit for my work, watching him recite talking points from documentation, he barely understood having someone finally see the truth felt validating. Our internal engineers ran an independent assessment based on what you described yesterday. She continued. Your specs overhead accuracy, scalability, all matched our results. Colton's charts, on the other hand, were wishful thinking at best. I blinked. So, what does that mean for the investment? It means we're reconsidering who we'd be investing in. She pulled out her tablet and turned it toward me. You're not just the system's lead developer. You're its architect, its inventor. And right now, your innovation is being marketed under someone else's name. The words struck harder than I expected. I had known it, of course, but seeing it framed like that, so direct, so indisputable, was something else entirely. You're the reason this deal is still on the table, Dr. Monroe said. And in that moment, I realized something. Colton had tried to bury me. But Evelyn Monroe had just handed me a shovel and pointed to his grave. Colton wasn't just stealing credit for my recent work, he was trying to inflate an entire company valuation on top of it. He was betting $15 million on a story he didn't even write. I looked across the table at Dr. Monroe. What would you need from me to complete your evaluation? She didn't hesitate. We need detailed technical documentation, accurate development timelines, and a candid assessment of both current system performance and its future scalability. Just as importantly, we need a clear picture of the company's internal structure, particularly around who's truly driving innovation. I met her gaze. In other words, you need to determine whether Colton is essential or expendable. She nodded. Exactly. Our investment committee meets next Friday to finalize our decision. The offer is $15 million for a 30% stake in Skybridge Analytics. But that's contingent on having confidence in the technical leadership. She let that last phrase linger in the air. Suddenly, the cafe felt electric with possibility. Dr. Monroe wasn't just offering validation. She was offering the chance to reshape the company's entire structure from the inside out. But I knew the risks. Going around Colton wouldn't just trigger retaliation, it could end my career if I wasn't careful. What exactly are you proposing? I asked. That depends on what you're willing to do to protect your work and the future of this technology. Over the next 2 hours, we built a plan. It was bold, it was risky, but it was also surgical in its precision. She would need extensive technical documentation that clearly tied the system's design and functionality to my name. I would need legal protection and a seat at the table formally. The proposal was simple, but strategic. Make the investment contingent upon the creation of a chief technology officer position reporting directly to the board of directors, not to the CEO. The role would come with equity executive authority and strong contractual safeguards against demotion or termination without cause. This isn't a power play, Dr. Monroe said plainly. It's a standard mechanism to ensure we're investing in the actual innovator. Most of our portfolio companies have this structure. I took a slow breath. Colton's going to know this came from me. He'll suspect, she said, with a small smile, but he won't be able to prove it. And it won't matter. That night, I got to work. Wednesday and Thursday became a marathon of archiving emails, repositories, patents, prototypes, white papers, evidence that told one story and one story only. The system didn't come from Colton Reed's vision. It came from mine. Colton, meanwhile, had started to unravel. He stopped by my new windowless office, half the size of my former one 3 times in 2 days. Each visit was polite on the surface, but clearly an intel-gathering mission. Marianne, have you heard anything from Apex Horizon lately? He asked Thursday afternoon, leaning against the doorframe with forced casualness. They've been asking for additional technical documentation? Strange, right? I haven't heard anything from them, I replied truthfully, because I hadn't. Not through company channels anyway. Our communication had been entirely private, secured through personal email and encrypted calls. By Friday afternoon, it all came to a head. Colton called an emergency strategy sync with senior staff. We assembled in the 26th floor conference room overlooking the skyline. I took my seat beside David Chen, now technically my supervisor, along with Jennifer Lee from marketing and a few other department heads. Colton entered late, his usual swagger noticeably absent. His brow was tight, his tone clipped. We've received Apex Horizon's final investment terms, he began. There are conditions. He clicked the screen to a slide titled Leadership Restructure Proposal. They're requesting the creation of a chief technology officer position with full authority over technical development reporting directly to the board. There was a brief pause before David spoke. But Colton, you manage all technical strategy now. Why would they want to shift that? They say it's standard in their tech investments, he replied, clearly irritated. They also require the role be filled by someone with proven expertise in machine learning and commercial AI deployment. A heavy silence settled. Everyone in the room turned toward me. Colton's gaze followed theirs. And for the first time in years, I saw uncertainty in his eyes, not the performative kind, but the real thing. Marianne, he said slowly, voice laced with strained composure. I believe they're expecting you. I offered a calm nod. I haven't received anything official, I replied, but I'd certainly be willing to support the company's growth in that capacity if the board agrees. He gave a tight nod, clearly swallowing his pride. Just 3 days ago, he'd demoted me. Now he had no choice but to acknowledge that I was the key to unlocking the $15 million he'd built his pitch around. The irony wasn't lost on the room. I caught Jennifer's faint smirk and David's approving nod. We'll discuss this privately, Colton said stiffly, already backing out. Of course, I replied, professionally pleasant. Monday morning, I stepped into his office. Once again, the same office where I'd been humiliated. But this time, it was Colton who looked cornered. Colton's tailored suit did little to mask the fatigue in his face or the tightness in his shoulders. The dark circles under his eyes hinted at a weekend spent wrestling with the same truth I'd known for days. He was out of moves. Marianne? He began, his voice carefully. Neutral, I've been rethinking our organizational structure in light of the Apex Horizon investment opportunity. I sat calmly across from him at his gleaming mahogany desk, the same desk where 5 days earlier he'd handed me a demotion slip with a smug grin. I believe establishing a chief technology officer role could support our long-term growth strategy. He continued, clearly reading from a mental script. The board has approved the position, and I'd like to offer it to you. He slid a manila folder across the desk. I picked it up, hands steady this time, and began reviewing the contract. The terms were everything Dr. Monroe and I had discussed. More even. CTO reporting directly to the board of directors, a $40,000 salary increase, above my original position equity in the company, and ironclad protections against unilateral dismissal or reassignment. Where Colton had tried to bury me, he now had no choice but to raise me higher than ever before. This is generous, I said, scanning the clauses that made me legally untouchable. Colton forced a smile. I've come to recognize that I may have underestimated your contributions to our technical infrastructure. The investors were quite clear. Your expertise is essential to their continued interest. I nodded slowly. And my recent reassignment. He cleared his throat. An unfortunate miscommunication. I'd like us to move forward with mutual respect and clarity. The words nearly got caught in his throat, but to his credit, he said them. That afternoon, we convened in the main conference room. The full senior staff was present. Colton made the announcement with a stiff smile. I was now Chief Technology Officer. The applause that followed was real relieved even. Jennifer Lee beamed from across the table. David Chen gave me a nod that said everything without a word. Dr. Monroe appeared via video from Apex Horizon. We're confident that Dr. Keller's leadership will guide Skybridge into a new era of innovation, she said formally, though the corner of her mouth hinted at quiet satisfaction. As I signed the contract, something inside me settled. The system I had poured 2 years of my life into was now under my stewardship, no longer at the mercy of someone who didn't understand it or me. The title, the salary, the recognition, those were nice. But the real win, Colton Reed would never again mistake silence for weakness. Colton kept his title, but everyone could sense the shift. In the weeks that followed, he became quieter during board meetings. When technical issues came up, eyes no longer turned to him. They turned to me. The engineers who had once tiptoed around executive politics now walked directly into my office, confident they'd be heard. I reinstated key team members Colton had sidelined, restructured the AI division for clarity and speed, and opened a direct feedback channel between R&D and client success. Skybridge Analytics began to operate the way I had always imagined, fast-focused and driven by the people who actually understood the technology. Investor confidence surged. Apex Horizon increased their initial investment to $25 million within 2 quarters, citing exceptional technical leadership in their public statement. Dr. Evelyn Monroe and I met regularly to discuss next-generation plans, including exploratory work in predictive modeling for healthcare and energy sectors. Meanwhile, Colton shrank further into his role. He no longer swaggered into rooms. His once firm grasp on messaging unraveled under pressure. And behind the scenes, I began receiving questions from board members, quiet ones. What's your long-term vision for Marianne? Have you ever considered stepping into a broader role? They weren't offering yet, but they were testing the waters. I played it carefully, redirecting focus to performance metrics and innovation roadmaps. But I kept the door open just enough. By the end of Q3, Colton's name was noticeably absent from external press. The last article that had quoted him was a reprint of the original investment announcement, now a footnote to Skybridge's real transformation. 6 months after my promotion, the board convened a closed-door executive session. I wasn't invited. I didn't need to be. 2 days later, an internal memo confirmed what I already knew. Colton Reed had stepped down as CEO. He received a modest exit package. No fanfare, no final speech. Just a line in a company-wide email and a quiet departure through the service elevator. I stood by the window of my corner office. His former corner office, watching the city buzz, far below coffee in hand as the news filtered through the building. He had underestimated me. He had tried to silence me. And now I was leading the company he thought I'd never belong in. Not by force, not by ego, but by earning what was mine. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening to my story. It wasn't just about a title or a paycheck. It was about reclaiming my voice in a place that tried to silence it. If you've ever been overlooked, undervalued, or dismissed for simply telling the truth, then you know exactly how that feels. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. What would you have done in my position? What's the quietest but strongest moment of power you've ever claimed back? Let's be clear, standing up doesn't always mean shouting. Sometimes it means documenting, planning, waiting. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is to outlast the ones who doubted you and to do it with grace. If you're facing a situation like mine, don't rush to explode. Prepare to elevate. Build your case. Know your value. And when the moment comes, step into it fully. If my story resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe. There's more to come. Quiet power doesn't make headlines, but it rewrites the future. And you're more capable than they think. Stay sharp, stay strategic, and never ever underestimate what you bring to the table. Marianne.